Welcome to the Student Startup Podcast. We develop first-class students for first-class service. Student Startup is the internship for entrepreneurs, not just for future business owners, but for any student who wants to reject childish ways and spend their years as a student interning as an adult.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the December Student Startup Podcast. You guys know how this works. Each month, we are walking through principles for business that can also be applied to all of life. These win-win entrepreneurial principles that you not only use for a startup, but you also use for your life. So we're joined today by one of my favorite entrepreneurs here in Wichita. We are joined by Mike Ferguson. He is the founder and owner of Lifesaver Learning. And we're going to be digging in today about the topic of applying entrepreneurial principles to your career. So treating your career like a startup, creating value, earning profit by solving problems for other people. And so, Mike, I'd just like to welcome you to the podcast and say thank you for giving us some of your time today.
My pleasure.
Guys, I'm going to read a quick introduction about Mike. This was from the Wichita Business Journal. I'm going to read just a quick little intro, and then Mike, I'm going to have you share a little bit about your business and where you are today. Here's what it says. Mike Ferguson has made helping others his life's work. A paramedic by training, Ferguson has spent nearly 3 decades training people how to properly respond to life-threatening situations, particularly in the critical moments before emergency responders arrive. He says the business was a natural extension of his work as a paramedic and with local healthcare systems. And check this out. Saving a life is the greatest thing a person can do from my perspective, says Ferguson. He turned the passion into a business for more than 30 years, and he is joining us today on the podcast. So, Mike, thank you again for joining us. Why don't you start off by telling us high-level overview of what keeps you busy today. Tell us about your business, and then we'll go into a little bit of the backstory about how you got here.
Well, we're coming up on 33 years now. I started back in 1990, and where I've done everything from in the very beginning, the first 15 years, working this as a part-time to a full-time event now. But as far as doing everything the small business does, you do it all. Just the day-to-day activity, scheduling programs, administrative work, and I'm going to have people doing that. I get to focus mainly on the teaching aspect of it.
Okay, Mike, this is great. Thank you for sharing that. Let's dive into a few of the numbers. As you think about your career in business, let's walk through a few numbers. How many clients you've served? Any guesses as to how many people you've employed? I'd love to just get a high-level snapshot for some of our listeners.
As far as over the last 32 years, went back and I did a little bit of research on that, keeping track. We trained a little over about 150,000 people over the years. We've had employees that range anywhere between 6 and 12 have been the constant number with regards to number of part-time employees that I have here. Usually one administrative person, the rest are instructors and so on. And as far as corporations and clients we've had over the years, it goes back to several hundred here within the Wichita area, that maybe 300-400 different entities over the years. Some of them have shut down and gone on and so on, working with anything from the small companies, manufacturing companies, aircraft industries, all the jobbers and the companies that support them, building parts and so on, going back to child care providers, foster care, babysitters, and then getting into healthcare where Wesley and Ascension have been good feeders for their ER staff, their intensivists, their hospitalists. We work with the KU Med students for around 30 years as well, getting to see the residents in the pharmacy program at KU. So we get to see all their students as well as WSU's programs that they have out there in healthcare. So we've diversified a lot. I learned early on when we were doing this, the work with aircraft industry was great when they were booming, but when they didn't do too well, then it hit everybody. So we diversified, going from just big corporations to the child care as well as healthcare. So we're split about a third each of those particular areas.
Mike, that's awesome. Students, as you're listening, I hope you heard that. when you're a business owner, being diversified is really important, right? So when one industry's down, another industry is up. Now, one of the ways that we've worked with you, Mike, is with some of the business owners in our student sitters program. So I wonder if you could walk through like your main business. My understanding is it's CPR certification, life-saving training. You mentioned over 150,000 people you've trained. I wonder if you could walk us through a little bit of just like the basics of what you train them in, and then a little bit of like why you do this. What keeps you going? You've been doing this for a long time. I'm sure you could kick your feet up and take it easy if you wanted to. Walk us through the what and also a little bit of the why.
Well, the natural extension of a paramedic realizing that over the years that police, fire, EMS used to do this training and budgets were cut and somebody had to do it. So it just seemed to be a natural segue in there that I can teach one person at a time or take care of one person at a time as a patient. And I've logged over some 17,000 calls over the years. But now that we've had an opportunity to expand that in terms of lots of training for lots of people, that's been very gratifying in itself. Because now, if any one of those 150,000 people, we've had dozens of calls over the years that, hey, it worked. I saved my daughter, my wife, husband, what have you. That's pretty gratifying in itself. Going back to the greatest thing a person can do is save a life, and that's echoed throughout what we do. We feel it's a noble thing that we're doing here and reaching the masses. Because first of all, if we don't educate the public, and when you were asking what that was about, going to we're an American Heart Association training center, so we have the authorization to issue certification cards, and we were one of the first in the country to, as a for-profit S corporation, to do that. And it was a very big deal for us to attain that, and we maintain that over all those years. But we do basic CPR, AED, first aid, and safety training. That's the bulk of what we do for both the child care providers, foster care, babysitters, and that. The corporations, we worked with Coke in the past, and Coleman and Evergy and companies like that. And in the healthcare profession, all the medical offices, dental offices, and the hospitals here locally, pretty much anything and everything regarding healthcare, they have to have those certifications. So the nice thing about this business is repeat business. So we get to redo those every 2 years, so it's not a one-time. So if you establish yourself, people like you. We've had people coming here for 30 years, and that's been, you can do all good things, but when you have one bad one, that's one that's going to come back and haunt you. So we basically have drawn this totally off word of mouth. We've done very little mass advertising. I never felt that was going to be the approach that we know who our clients would be, so we just went out and established relationships with them. If you have happy clients, they talk and tell their friends. I think that's been a big part of our success is we're having happy clients and doing what we say we're going to do and exceed that. That's true in anything we're doing in life now. You're going to do it, make it worthwhile, be the best at what it is, and find a niche. And all we did is fill a niche that was out there.
Mike, I love, there's so many pieces there. And students, here's the deal. If you guys are humble and hungry and you're trying to learn, you're going to actually spend quite a bit of time in your life around people like Mike, folks who have been successful and they've reached many of the goals that we only aspire to. And you're going to hear parts of their story. And if you're smart, you're going to want to copy pieces of them. And here would be my encouragement. The need to copy exactly what they do is less important than figuring out the principles underneath their success, because you're different than Mike. Mike's different than you. It was a different time when he got started. It was a different business. He has different skill sets, but there's some principles in Mike's story that you can apply to your life. I want to pull out a couple of these here. First of all, Mike, if I'm hearing you correctly, you didn't set out to start a business. What I heard in your story is you were just trying to solve a problem. You saw an opportunity and the business was just the natural byproduct of wanting to solve that problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a small town where I had a 3-generation auto mechanic machine shop family business called Ferguson Service, and worked as a mechanic learned to be a mechanic from 8 to 18, and that's when I left for the Air Force and got into this. So I never even thought about starting another type of business. I knew that when I got in the Air Force and after getting out of the Air Force, went to work for Sedgwick County EMS, then this is something that I really enjoyed doing. And I'm very fortunate because I've never sought out to do anything else. This is what I had a passion for. I wanted to be a paramedic. I didn't want to go on beyond that because I liked the environment that I was working in out of the hospital setting. And that being said, after running these calls, and we would see time and time again, I come across these patients that knew that say, this is a good example. I've seen this played out several hundred times. This is probably one of the biggest driving forces is we're not doing a good enough job educating the public on calling 911. And I've seen time and time again where they delayed calling 911 by 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And by the time we got there, it was too late. And if they'd have just called that earlier, I always say, when in doubt, call. If you have somebody that's laying there, you don't know whether they're dead or alive, start pressing their chest. They don't want it, they'll let you know. But we don't get do-overs in this business. I've had the privilege of working on people's worst day of their life. They're having the worst day of their life. They call us to make it better. So we take that pretty serious here at Lifesaver. But the fact is, it's all about the public. The quicker they call 911, hit speaker, put the phone down. The dispatcher will talk you through the steps of what you need to do until we get there. As soon as we arrive, chances are they may still be on the phone with you, talking through the steps. So that's what we try to emphasize in all our classes: call early, not late. It's added value, but it's the public out there that are the heroes, not us. We're just taking it from what they initiated by making the call and early treatment. We're the intermediate role, and then we get it to the hospitals where they work their magic with all the technology and the talents that they have.
Students, I hope you heard what Mike just said. He used the term hero to describe his customers. And here's how it usually works in many businesses. Many businesses act like they're the hero, but the successful brands put their customer in the seat of being the hero of the story. So Mike tells a story about saving somebody's life. Is it Mike saving somebody's life? Or is it this person, this customer that came to Mike for training, was empowered to then go and save somebody's life? And there's a couple things here, right? So you can see in Mike's business that this business is making the world a better place. It's a win-win. Yes, Mike's getting money and he's earning profit from his business, but his customers are getting a ton of value, as well as the people that they in turn go and serve and ultimately save many, many lives. But I would challenge you to think, most businesses, whether you are driving a truck for Walmart, or whether you are an IT person in a fertilizer business, or whether you are teaching school or whatever it is, if you can keep your eye focused on that end person that you're making their life better, if you can focus on, there's this person out there that has goals and is trying to do something in their life, and I can help them reach their goals. They are the hero. I can help them reach their goals through my business. You'll be really successful. There's another thing that I'm hearing as well, Mike, is the passion in your voice. You can tell students that Mike loves the work he gets to do. And that's an important piece of a successful business, right? Passion and profits and pricing and all of these different things. But the way Mike got to this point where he loves what he's doing, he's good at it, and it's meeting a real need in the world, Mike didn't get there in the way you might think. You know, there's so many people who are sitting in their high school classroom or their college classroom. They're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I've got all this pressure to find the perfect career, and they're paralyzed by fear and they do nothing. So Mike, I want you to rewind it for us a little bit. I heard a little bit of your story you shared just a minute ago. You started working when you were 8 years old, working in the family business. You eventually skilled up. Tell me what happened next.
Well, 3 days after I graduated from high school, part of the thought was working as a mechanic. I was very impressed with granddad and dad, and I always thought I'd just stay in the business and do that. But about the time I was getting ready to graduate, the computers were coming out, and those $50,000 computers were unattainable for a small business like ours. We sat down with a family discussion and thought, well, maybe this isn't a good place for me to be. So I just out of nowhere said, well, I think I'm going to join the Air Force and try something different and exciting, and joined the Air Force, which I was 5 years active duty, and 3 with the Guard, which was my pleasure. Spent part of that in Southeast Asia, and finished up at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. And it was a great job, best job, great memories there. That's who I am today based on the military credit responsibility I was given, the experiences I had, the exposure to death, and as a flight medic in aircraft it's an investigation. It was a pretty gruesome existence, some of the things that you saw. So that'll either make or break you, whether you're doing this kind of work. But as far as soon as getting off active duty, the one reason that I did I've probably been career military, but there were promotional opportunities at that time. Post Vietnam was winding down and so on. So I would need to be challenged, and just hanging out and getting by wasn't something in my makeup. So I got out. The GI Bill put me through Kansas Newman, which was Kansas Newman College in University now, bachelor's. And I always thought maybe I might do maybe a business, but I had no idea what it would be. So I got a business and marketing degree. And then from that, I went to WSU for a master's program later. I need some healthcare education and administration. So little bit I know, in the back of my mind, I must have been thinking something might happen later, and sure enough, it did. But as far as those opportunities to grow, when I got out of the military, I went to work for Sedgwick County EMS and started their paramedic program in 75 and worked there 70s, 80s, and 90s. 80s, I had an opportunity to go to work for LifeWatch out of Wesley. So as a street medic, the air medical, which I spent in the military, was kind of the premier. That's what you aspire to as a paramedic, flight medic, kind of elite group of people, and had a great time there. Had an opportunity to go to Saudi Arabia. These were each promotional opportunities, but I just didn't want to leave that job. I loved what I did at LifeWatch, and out of the 100 applicants that got that one job, I was selected. So that was a big feat in itself. I didn't think I had a shot at that for whatever reason. I've got a plan for you. So anyway, I was there at LifeWatch for 3 years. We went to Saudi Arabia. We didn't know how long we'd be there. And after a couple of years, the Middle East was getting ready for the Gulf War. And we decided it was time to come back. And when I did, lucky for me, LifeWatch put a freeze on there filling that slot I'd left, which was a coveted job. And I worked another 5 years there. So that was a dream for me to be able to come back. Thus, on the way back from Saudi Arabia, since we'd been out of the world here in the United States, which is very different culturally, I was hired as a technical advisor, set up their training centers to train instructors to teach other people in EMS. So that was my role in Saudi Arabia, as I took the cream of the crop. I traveled the country, set up 8 training centers, and then trained instructors to train the people that were on the ambulance and so on. So it was an incredible, neat opportunity. And they had other people like me that specialized in communication, logistics, and all the different other variables that I was training part of it. My master's degree was part of that too. I had to complete a modified version of the DOT, the standard for paramedics here in the United States. So I learned a lot real quick. And coming back on the flight, I thought I had no idea what I was going to do. Go back to work LifeWatch, and I thought, this is where I put my business plan together. And as soon as I got back here, I had no idea I was going to get work for LifeWatch again. But while I was doing that, that's when I started Lifesaver Learning, and the rest is history all these years later. But it's been a great journey with that. I've got to reach my dream of starting this business. And I tell you, it's a pretty scary time when you are doing this. Because you really don't know what you're doing. Here's the deal. I had a piece about it a couple of times in life. When you start a business, you got to believe in yourself. If it's easy, everybody be doing it. So it's got a lot of stressors, especially walking away from the time that I was at LifeWatch. They shut it down, the program, after 26 years in 96. I went to Via Christi, worked 15 years there. I do physician outreach education, where I'm doing pretty much what Lifesaver Learning is doing now, but I was doing Via Christi. I'd go to rural areas, train their physicians and nurses and so on. And after 13 years of doing that, a job I dearly love, but when you deal with politics and administration and so on, I'd always told my wife, there will be a day. And that was after I'd already started Lifesaver Learning almost 15 years, working at part-time and putting all that money pretty much back into the business, because I was making a living through Via Christi, which was a very great opportunity. It was a one-man office, and they provided me a suburban expense account, and I traveled the state and took care of things with regards to training, the very same thing I'm doing here. But when things changed, administration and so on, it was time for me to go. I always knew that time would. I walked in the door that night and didn't even say a word to my wife. She says, it's time. And it's just when you kind of terrified in the sense of you've got children, you've got braces, you've got a private faith-based education you're paying for. How are you going to pull this off? But in doing so, making that leap of faith, I remember to the minute, 2:21 on a Friday, when I walked away, resigned, and it was all on me. And I didn't have any idea whether I was going to survive or not. So it does get kind of emotional when you think about that now. And looking back, I said, well, we did it. And nothing ever waned. Everything was the same or better from that point on. So I was very fortunate.
Wow, Mike, that's incredible. Students, I hope you're taking notes. I certainly am. There's a few things that Mike said there that I want to pull out a little bit more. The first one is just like his path. It was a windy road, you know? There's something when you're trying to think about like what to do with your career. Do I start a business or do I chase my career? For most people, most of the time, starting a business is actually not the answer. But you can apply these principles from business, these win-win principles, choosing partners wisely, thinking long-term, having high character, all the rest. You can apply those things to your career. I think Mike's a great example of that. I want to start, though, with something that you may have heard in school. When you're thinking about, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? Or what do I want to do with my career? Think to yourself, what is the advice that many teachers will give you? Think about that to yourself. What comes to mind? What many teachers or many mentors or counselors will say is they'll say, oh, you should just do what you love. You should do what you love. Some will take it one step further and they'll say, well, yeah, you should do what you love and you should do something that you're good at. Okay, two things. But here's the problem with that thinking. What do I like and what am I good at? Who's the focus of that conversation? Well, the focus, of course, is yourself. And the way you are successful in business and in life is by solving problems for other people. And Mike demonstrated that. You know, there's this saying of follow your passion. And Mike didn't follow his passion. He brought his passion with him and he followed opportunity to see himself go into the military. When the military opportunities were limited, he exited the military and went into the private sector. And you heard him talking about this. You heard the word opportunity over and over again. Where is there a need that I can fill? Where is there a lane where I can create more value? And I just love that, Mike. So as students, as you're thinking about it, yes, you want to get to the sweet spot where Mike is now. He's doing something he loves. He's doing something that he is good at. And he's doing something that other people really need and are willing to pay him for. But when you're starting, you can't always get all three of those at first. The most important one is finding a real need in the world, finding something that other people need or want and are willing to pay you money for. Mike's story is a great example of that. Mike, I want to call back to something else you said. You talked about putting together your business plan. If I understand your story correctly, this was actually 15 years before you went full-time with your business. Could you walk us through a little bit of that business planning process and maybe a little bit of how that business plan changed over the years as you learned more about your business?
You know, that brings back a flood of memories in the sense that I don't know that I was real talented in putting that plan together, but it was enough to get me started, at least on a part-time basis. And what I found was very helpful to me, I approached Dr. Kraft at WSU. I don't have a lot of resources out there, but he was dealing with the business and the master's level. And I approached him about a class project. And what he did, and this is his master's program, divided the class into teams. This was all at their expense. That was a thing that I'll never be so grateful for over the years. I couldn't even begin to afford that. But anyway, the project was for groups of four. I think there was 5 different groups of 4. There's master's class. That was their assignment, put together a business plan for lifesaver learning. So I went through and had a deep conversation where I wanted to go and what I was doing. At the end of the semester, I went in and sat down, and they all presented their proposals to me, and I've still got them in my file here. And that's really where they really identified maybe where I need to go. The next semester, the expert, which more of a marketing approach, was they did another class project where they went through and did a statewide survey of areas that there was a need, kind of a needs assessment. And this was, I just using resources of local talent at Wichita State. And I forever grateful for those professors that saw that here's a guy out here like me with an incredible, what we thought was, they must have thought it was too, this is important stuff, not just here in Wichita, but in the rural areas, what the needs are, and did an assessment for that. So same thing into the semester, everybody came in, presented that to me, and I've just kind of worked off of that. But I don't know if that really answers your question in the sense. Basically, we're talking about people a lot smarter than I am, and I have always looked at that I have a good accountant, I have a good attorney, I have people that are the best. I've got the 20-somethings computer IT wizard working for me that just take, I know my talents and they aren't there. My talent and what I love doing is mentoring younger people that we're discussing this for that matter, but also to teach. Every day I get to teach, start at 4:30 in the morning, devotional time, get up and get ready for the day. A lot of my busy work I try to knock out by 8 o'clock, and I got the rest of the day to focus in on my passion for what I do. That's been the combination of what works for me. Maybe a curse getting up that time of morning because I'm not much good after 10 o'clock at night, but when I get up at 67 years of age, I'm so excited to get going again. As long as I've got my health, I don't know when it'll ever end. As far as I know now, I don't have an in time that I'm never going to retire, because I know those who have been before me that worked up till the time they dropped dead in their classroom. And that's an inspiration for me to see. They had the passion right at the very end. I do have an AED here, and I always tell the classes too, by the way, if something happens, it's here right here in front of me. So if you want to resuscitate and finish the class, make sure you call 911 and start CPR.
Oh, Mike, I love that. So there's a couple things there. One of those is you just talked about the joy it is for you to work. And this reminds me of one of the most famous teachings of Jesus, who said it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. You guys can tell at this point in Mike's life, he's continuing to serve, not even for the money anymore, although I'm sure the business is doing better than ever. You mentioned before, Mike, that most years are a little better than the year before, but your passion for really serving people. So you're hearing that for his customers. But something else you heard is a recognition that Mike doesn't have all the gifts, which takes humility to say that. I mean, Mike's the boss, like the actual boss. But for him to say, hey, I'm not good at everything. I've got a couple of very specific skill sets, being able to teach, being able to empower other people to be successful, which is really two sides of that same coin. In the same way that it's more blessed to give when it comes to serving your customers, it's also the greatest blessing can be helping somebody else become a giver. So, Mike, I wonder if you could speak just a little bit more to that in terms of your passion for empowering your team and helping your employees develop as a person, even if they're only going to be with you for a couple of years.
I think we can all think back, and we try to do that for most of our classes. As soon as people start showing up, I'll usually ask them, who they are, where they're from, and what got them in this profession, especially when we're talking healthcare profession, because I know a lot of those are people, say, going into physical therapy. They were excellent athletes. They had an injury they sustained that took that dream away from them. But they were so impressed with how a physical therapist or that physician or nurse or somebody took care of them. And those are all things that are pretty interesting, to say the least. And going back to when I went in the Air Force, this is kind of an important point, how what happens to you may impact you. I went in the Air Force an intelligence specialist, which is the furthest thing from my abilities. Okay, I had a good recruiter apparently that had shortages in that area. But anyway, that's what I went in. I had the James Bond thing pictured, and that was going to be some neat stuff. Okay, and when I got in and through tech school and waited on my top secret security clearance and started school, I ended up getting Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and I was hospitalized for a couple of weeks. I don't remember part of my life in that experience, but it was that transformation I had that I'd never really been sick before, been hospitalized before, and I find myself in a hospital. I was so impressed with how the corpsmen and the nurses and the physicians took care of me and brought me back from what could have been a potential fatal situation. And when I finished, I went back to tech school. I was too far behind. I missed a couple weeks of school, and it was a very intense training. They said you could either wait 6 months for the next class or you could retrain. And that's where my transformation came when I looked at healthcare opportunities, and they had this flight medic, sounded kind of exciting too. That's where I got into flight medicine. Spent a year school of aerospace medicine, did my training, and from that point on, that was my birth of how I got in this profession to begin with. So that wasn't the original intent, but now that through the circumstances, God has an interesting way of working, because I would have never thought healthcare. Nobody in my family was healthcare, but that's how it kind of happened.
Wow. And I love that example from what you shared of, first of all, again, students, figuring out what you're good at and what you like and what other people need. That is not something that you can just think real hard and sit in your room by yourself and just think about. Much of that needs to be discovered, and you're going to have some starts and stops along the way. You may be like Mike, and you may try something like high-tech security and military intelligence and find out, oh, wow, this is actually not something that I'm made to do. And you'll have to do that for a little while until you find your next gig. And you may even be surprised, like the obstacles you face, like getting sick, opens up an avenue to get involved in a future career. I think here's the lesson, students. Just do something. Get out there and solve a problem for somebody. Get out there and be productive. And along the way, make sure you're always learning. Make sure you're always learning. Make sure you're willing to pivot. You've got your eyes wide open for more problems to solve. So again, it seems like a windy path to go. I mean, shoot, Mike's gone from a family business to military to all over the world doing healthcare, very specialized, then doing teaching, now running a business. But really, it's this continual search to solve problems for others and really serve.
Just, I'd recommend, I'm probably one of the most impatient people in the world with regards to anything in life. I want it to happen now. And I've learned as I get older, I've gotten better about that, but never look at any experience as a negative, because life's an ongoing learning process. And every time you do something that didn't work out, you don't have to even think about that anymore. Check it off and move on. And you can be the best of anything you want to do. And that's going to be determination on you, your motivation, get up. And I got to tell you, it's a very different world, as Joe mentioned, much more difficult world, in my opinion, growing up now than when I grew up. But the challenges are still there. There's still opportunity for the joy, peace, and hope in everything that we do. And it's just an exciting time in my life to look at on the last third of my life. That's if I make it to 90, say. But as far as what I want to do, I don't have any desires to do anything else, keep doing this. But my role now is a mentor, and I get the most joy out of meeting with younger people, both men and women, because I've had so many, over the years, you'd asked that early, how many people, I've probably had 100 different people work here over the years. Over the last 5 years, predominantly most of my employees have been WSU students, KU students, Kansas State students, Newman students. And they were looking at just, I recruited them from a BLS class or a CPR first aid class, and I was so impressed with their interpersonal skills. I can teach anybody to teach this stuff. It's a matter of, do you have those interpersonal skills? Do you have a passion? Do you have good people skills that we can harness that? And to see them start out here where they're thinking they want to go into the nursing program or the physician assistant program. I've got a half dozen people come through medical school, they're all ER doctors. And they were able to fine tune and confirm that's what they wanted to do. And that was simply by teaching and teaching those very people that they wanted to be. Somebody wants to become a physical therapist, so they started working here. We do the training for WSU for physical therapists, or the PA programs, or nursing, or speech therapy, or whatever, occupational therapy, dental hygienist. We've had all those people work here. And they just had something about them that I picked up that told them to stay after class. I wanted to talk to them and give them a part-time opportunity here. And we're always looking, just like the Marines looking for a few good men and women, we're always looking for people to recruit to. And the best part of our story is we get to see them move on from here. They're not going to stay here. Somebody's going to get a great opportunity to follow and doing what I'm doing at the level that I'm working at. But at least at this point, we need other instructors to do the training. Sometimes we need one instructor, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 people, and just having those people available. So it's a flexible opportunity to work, but you're getting exposure, you're building the people skills, and see where they started when they worked here. where they weren't so sure about being out in front of 6 people and then 16 and then 36 and then 60 people. But to see the ease as they grew and the joy they had in conveying this. And there aren't many jobs you get an evaluation every time you go to work. And at the end of every class, they fill out an evaluation. You get see best class I ever had, awesome instructor. And you talk about motivation. That's a pretty cool thing. And if you did something maybe wasn't great, then you learn from it. But man, that's just talk to me. I always ask people, I don't care what your age is, if you have a better way of doing something, I'd be a fool not to listen to that. Because this is a different world. We market differently. We deal with a different world now in terms of priorities and sensitivities and all this stuff. Patients are more complicated than they used to be. So you just need to be aware of that and open. And I'm kind to everybody. I try to emphasize this area, be kind to everybody. We don't know the abuse, neglect, probably 60% of our society has been through. And we're dealing with people at a very vulnerable time. They're injured, they're ill, and what have you. But we got to take that seriously, because you may be the first person that's ever been kind to them that genuinely wanted to help them, because they've been told their whole life they're worthless, they're never going to amount to anything. And once that's pounded in your head, it's hard to break through that, especially it's by the ones that you respected in your family and friends. And that's what I think all of us, as we get older, we have an incredible opportunity to mentor all these young people. And that's probably the thing I enjoy most.
Well, Mike, you pretty much hit on all of the principles we've written down for business and life. I mean, I'm looking at it here, the importance of character, right? Being people smart and being humble to learn, and you want to serve others. You know, I'm hearing you talk about how important it is to pick good people, choose partners wisely, how important that is. And then another thing is this idea of like how you treat people. And, you know, students, there's this nefarious narrative out there that says if you want to be successful in business, you need to lie, cheat, and steal. And that's just not how it works. What you've seen, and you'll see it in the world all the time, is there will be some folks who lie, cheat, and steal. But if you want to be like Mike and you want to be in business for 30 years and have a trusted name and still be around 30 years from now, it is not only the right thing to do to treat people with respect and kindness and dignity, it is a requirement if you want to be in business long term. It's not only right, but it's also good business. So Mike, thank you for being just a really great model for that. Well, Mike, as we look to wrap things up, I'm going to ask you to share any other further thoughts as you think through these win-win principles for business and life. But before I have you do that, I just want to make one more reflection about Mike's story. So as Mike was young, you know, your age, there's a couple things that he did through his story. One is he developed real skills. You know, if you're going to go start a business, you got to have some skills, and he was developing skills wherever he went. What he was also doing is you could tell this, you know, he had a business plan. He did his business part-time for a while. No doubt he was also saving and building up capital for the future, right? So, you know, businesses take typically a small amount of capital to get started, as well as your competence. That's your skills. But most importantly, it's your character, his reputation, the people that he had worked with throughout the years. He had built up a good name that was going to be trusted. So as you think about, as you are preparing for your future business, get some competence, learn some skills, save up some capital to buy your first rental home, or invest in stocks where you're owning something, or put some money in a bank account for a future business, right? All of those are good ways to build capital. But as Proverbs says, a good name is worth more than silver and gold. So the most important thing is your character, your reputation, and the trust you build with the folks you work with. So Mike, I'm going to pass it back to you. Any other thoughts on these, you know, timeless principles that can be applied to business or life?
Well, I know I've tried to live my life, treat others you like to be treated. I mean, that would be, you can imagine what this world would be like if we all did that. And you're right, the things that are going on in this world. I think first 27 years, so I've met my wife and got married at 27 years of age. You start out living the world's way. And I'm not an advocate of that. I'm glad I got to experience that and I survived, because I don't deserve anything I've got right now because of that. But when you do it God's way, it's going to be so much sweeter, and it gives you unlimited opportunity in the sense that you know that if you're doing the right things for the right reason, if you have a passion for what you're doing and you're doing it God's way, I mean, he's going to bless that. And we know who wins, even with the chaos in this world. You have so much more difficult time in life than I ever dreamed of, because I'm living it now, and I'm thinking about my children when they're 25 and 27 years of age. And we didn't start a family until we were 40. And with that being said, I felt I was a little better equipped. So you can do it all, but you just need to be patient. So we got married at 27, started our family at 40, and looking back on that, that's the best thing. For one thing, I could afford to have kids in, and I know I didn't get any cheaper living anymore. Also, I think the maturity part of it tied into it. And it's very humbling when kids are witnessing you about their lives, and they're living God's way too. So it's kind of the ultimate challenge, is finding that blend in there that's going to work out for everybody. Just blending all the crazy things going on in this world. That's the best advice I can give from God's way. You can't have to be successful, because you can still find that peace, joy, and hope in everything you do today, personally and professional. And we know how it turns out. So that's a win-win for everybody.
No doubt. No doubt. Mike, thank you. This is phenomenal. Students, I know you're sitting at home and you're listening to this while you're mowing or while you're working out or while you're driving. And I just want you to pause and clap it up. Mike Ferguson, Lifesaver Learning, over 150,000 customers served, 100 employees over the years, served a ton of people. And he's doing business the right way. And that's what it takes to be successful over 30 years. So, Mike, thank you for being a great example of that. Thanks for giving us some of your time, and looking forward to continuing to stay in touch.
Yeah, my pleasure.